Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It is quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support truly means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let us return to our main character. Tonight's story is titled, Be My Wife for a Month. The millionaire whispered neither knew the lie would turn to forever. The city was wrapped in a thin mist, the kind that made the skyline of New York shimmer like a dream behind glass. Inside a penthouse overlooking the glittering streets, Adrian Cole stood beside a floor-to-ceiling window, his reflection sharp against the night. He was the kind of man who filled a room without speaking, tall, calm, dangerously composed. Across from him sat Lena Bloom, a florist whose hands still carried the faint scent of roses. Her fingers were trembling as she tried not to stare at the contract spread out before her. The gold pen beside it gleamed under the chandelier like a challenge. Adrian's voice broke the silence low, steady, and unhurried. Be my wife. For a month. Call it a deal. The words hung in the air like smoke. Lena blinked, unsure if she had heard him right. She looked up, meeting his eyes cold gray softened by something almost human. Excuse me? He leaned slightly forward, folding his hands. I need a wife on paper, just for 30 days. After that, we go our separate ways. You will be compensated more than fairly. His tone was businesslike, but there was something else beneath it, a tiredness that money could not hide. Her throat tightened. Why me? Because you are not like the others, he said simply. You do not belong to this world, and that is exactly what I need right now. Lena glanced back at the contract. The numbers written there could save her mother's flower shop, the one about to be repossessed by the bank in less than a week. She had promised she would find a way, anyway, to keep it open. Adrian's voice softened, almost a whisper now. You sign this, you walk away in a month with enough money to pay your debts. No strings beyond the paper. I just need your presence at dinners, at the gala, in the photographs. Appearances matter. Her pulse thudded in her ears. The air between them felt heavy, charged with everything unsaid. What happens if I say no? He looked at her for a long moment before replying, Then you will spend the next month watching everything you love slip away. I am offering you a choice, Miss Bloom, not a threat. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere over the Hudson. Lena's reflection flickered in the glass, small, uncertain, but fierce. She had spent her whole life surviving storms. This one just came dressed in a suit. Finally, she reached for the pen. What are the rules? She asked quietly. Adrian's lips curved, a faint trace of something that was not quite a smile. 3. Do not fall in love. Do not question my reasons, and when the month ends, you disappear. Her fingers hovered over the signature line. Somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered that this was madness. Yet another voice, softer, older, more desperate, told her it was the only way. She signed. Adrian slid the contract toward himself, scanning the ink, then extended a small velvet box across the table. Inside lay a simple gold ring. Wear it, he said. The world needs to believe it. When her hand brushed his, a jolt of warmth cut through the chill of the room. He looked at her then, really looked, and for a fleeting second the steel in his eyes melted. Welcome to the deal, Mrs. Cole, he whispered. Lena exhaled, the weight of her decision sinking in. Somewhere below, the city kept breathing, oblivious to the bargain made high above its lights. She had just agreed to be a stranger's wife for 1 month, but as she met Adrian's unreadable gaze, she felt the quiet tremor of a truth neither of them yet knew. No contract could contain what was about to begin. The next morning, the city was already awake when Lena opened her eyes inside a world that did not belong to her. The penthouse guest suite was larger than her entire apartment. Sunlight filtered through white curtains, touching the marble floor like gold. For a moment, she forgot why she was there. Then she saw the ring on her finger, thin, gold, unreal, and reality hit her all over again. Adrian Cole was a man of schedules. At exactly 7:30, a soft knock sounded on her door. When she opened it, one of his assistants stood waiting with a tablet and a polite smile. Good morning, Mrs. Cole. Mr. Cole asked me to deliver your itinerary for the day. Mrs. Cole. The words landed heavy, strange, like a costume that did not fit. She thanked the assistant and closed the door. The schedule was full of events she could barely understand: charity luncheons, corporate dinners, photo sessions. Beneath the printed letters was a small handwritten note in Adrian's clean script. Breakfast, 8 a.m. dining room. Lena's heart beat faster. The mirror reflected a woman who looked more like an actress than a florist. She tied her hair neatly, put on the cream dress left for her in the wardrobe, and whispered to herself, "You can do this. It is just 1 month." When she entered the dining room, Adrian was already seated, reading the morning paper. The table between them was long enough for 10 people, but only 2 plates were set. He looked up briefly. "Good morning, Mrs. Cole." "Good morning," she replied, her voice smaller than she intended. He gestured toward the food. "You should eat. Today will be a long day." She sat, trying not to stare. Everything about him was precise, the way he cut his toast, the way he folded the paper into equal halves. There was power in his calmness, and it made her uneasy. "Do you do this every day?" she asked quietly. "Routine keeps chaos away," he said. "You will learn that soon enough." They ate in silence for a while. Outside, the city glowed through the glass windows. Adrian finally set down his cup of coffee. "Our first public appearance will be this evening. It is a shareholders' dinner. You will stay close, speak little, and smile when necessary. People will test you. They will ask about us. I expect discretion." Quote. Lena nodded, unsure whether she was more nervous about the event or the way his gaze lingered on her as he spoke. "I understand." "Good. After breakfast, my staff will take you to the designer. You will need a dress appropriate for tonight." He stood, already done, and added almost as an afterthought, "If anyone asks how we met, tell them we were introduced at a charity gala last spring. Keep it simple. Simplicity sounds true." When he left the room, the silence rushed back in. She exhaled slowly. Everything about this arrangement felt like walking on a glass bridge, beautiful, fragile, and one wrong step away from falling. By afternoon, she found herself standing inside a luxury boutique surrounded by fabric and mirrors. The designer, a graceful woman with sharp eyes, circled her like a hawk. "Mr. Cole's wife should look elegant, but approachable," she said. "You are not a trophy. You are a story." A story. The words echoed in Lena's mind. Hours later, she stepped out of the fitting room in a dark emerald gown that hugged her frame softly. The designer clapped her hands. "Perfect. He will not regret choosing you." When she returned to the penthouse that evening, Adrian was waiting near the elevator. He wore a black suit, flawless, distant. For a brief second, his eyes widened as he saw her. The change was subtle, but she caught it a pause, a breath that did not belong to a man without feelings. "You look appropriate," he said, though his voice carried more warmth than the words allowed. Lena smiled faintly. "Thank you. I practice not tripping over my own shoes." A flicker of amusement crossed his face. "Let us hope that practice pays off tonight." The car ride to the event was quiet except for the rain tapping on the windows. Lena stared at the city lights passing by, her heart thudding in rhythm with the sound. Adrian checked his watch, then looked at her reflection in the glass. "You are nervous." "I am human," she replied. His mouth curved slightly. "That will help. People trust what feels human." When they arrived, flashes from cameras exploded like lightning. Hands reached, voices shouted questions. Adrian took her hand without hesitation, his fingers firm around hers. "Just keep walking," he whispered close to her ear. In that moment, she felt something unexpected, a sense of safety. Not because of the money, not because of the contract, but because for the first time in a long while, someone had steadied her when she was about to fall. Inside the ballroom, chandeliers glittered like captured stars. The air smelled of champagne and ambition. Every head turned toward them. Lena held her breath as Adrian leaned closer once more, his voice low and steady. "Smile, Mrs. Cole. Tonight the performance begins." Cole. And as she lifted her chin and smiled under the flood of lights, she wondered whether anyone else could hear her heart pounding louder than the music. The ballroom glittered with gold and glass, a sea of gowns and tuxedos moving to the rhythm of a live string quartet. Every corner shimmered with wealth, every smile practiced to perfection. Lena stood beside Adrian, her hand resting lightly on his arm, the weight of eyes and whispers pressing against her from all directions. She remembered his instructions: stay close, speak little, and smile. But the truth was, she could feel her pulse in her throat. The lights were too bright, the perfume too heavy, and the sound of laughter felt like it belonged to another world. "Breathe," Adrian murmured beside her, his voice low enough for only her to hear. "If you faint now, they will think I starve my wife." Lena exhaled a shaky breath. That would not fit the story of a happy couple, would it? His lips curved, the ghost of a smirk. "Then let us not ruin the story." As the evening unfolded, people approached them: board members, investors, journalists. Every greeting was dipped in politeness and curiosity. Some smiles lingered too long on Lena, as if trying to read the truth behind her polished image. Adrian handled it all with effortless charm, answering every question with precision. When one reporter leaned in with a sly tone, "Mr. Cole, the public was surprised by your sudden marriage. How did you two meet?" Lena froze, but Adrian did not miss a beat. "At a charity gala last spring," he said smoothly. "She was standing by the hydrangeas, trying to save them from wilting under the lights. I offered her a glass of water for the flowers, of course." Laughter rippled around them, and for the first time, Lena smiled for real. She glanced at him, a silent thank you passing between their eyes. He had made the lie sound like poetry. The night stretched on with endless toasts and rehearsed laughter. But under the surface of champagne bubbles and glittering chandeliers, something quieter was forming a strange, delicate awareness between them. Later, as the crowd thinned, Adrian led her toward the terrace. The city sprawled below, millions of lights flickering like restless stars. He loosened his tie, his voice softer now. "You did well tonight. I tried not to embarrass you," she said. "You did more than that. You convinced people who spend their lives doubting everything. That is not easy." The wind carried the faint sound of violins from inside. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then Lena turned toward him. "Why does it feel like everyone here wears a mask?" Adrian's gaze held hers. "Because they do. Because in rooms like this, honesty costs more than diamonds." Something in his tone, quiet, tired, made her see him differently. Beneath the flawless suit and power, there was a man carrying too much silence. "Then what does that make us?" she asked. His answer came slower than before, a convincing illusion. Their eyes met, and for one suspended breath, the air shifted. The distance between them was thin as silk. Then a flash from a camera shattered the moment. A photographer had followed them to the terrace, eager for a candid shot. Adrian straightened instantly, his expression returning to its composed mask. "That is enough for tonight," he said, leading her back inside. On the way out, an older board member stopped them. "Adrian, your wife is quite charming," the man said, raising his glass. "You two seem very real together." Adrian's hand tightened slightly around hers. "As real as it gets," he replied. The words stayed with her long after the applause faded. In the car, the silence between them was almost fragile. Rain dotted the windows again, blurring the city lights into soft streaks of color. Lena watched their reflections in the glass, two strangers dressed as a perfect couple. Yet when the car hit a bump and her hand brushed his, he did not pull away. He turned his palm upward, fingers open, waiting. For a moment, she hesitated. Then she let her hand rest in his. The city kept moving outside, indifferent to the quiet shift happening between them. By the time they reached the penthouse, she could no longer tell whether she was still acting, or if somewhere between the smiles and the lies, a small truth had begun to grow. Adrian opened the door and paused, looking at her. "You handled yourself better than I expected." "Do you always expect the worst?" she asked softly. He considered the question, then gave a faint, tired smile. "It saves me from disappointment." And with that, he walked into the dim light of the hall, leaving Lena alone with the faint echo of violins and the uncomfortable realization that the deal no longer felt like just business. The following days unfolded in a rhythm that felt both strange and hypnotic. Every morning, Lena woke to the faint hum of the city below and the quiet certainty that nothing in her life belonged to her anymore. She moved through Adrian Cole's world like an actress reciting lines she had memorized overnight. Designer fittings, charity meetings, luncheons with strangers who called her Mrs. Cole as if the name had always been hers. But sometimes, between the rehearsed smiles and polite nods, she would catch Adrian watching her. Not in the sharp, calculating way of a businessman, but as if he were trying to understand something he could not quite name. One afternoon, after yet another interview, Adrian's driver stopped in front of a glass-walled studio overlooking Central Park. "We are making a quick detour," Adrian said. "I want you to see something." Inside, sunlight spilled across canvases and jars of paint. A small group of children were painting under the guidance of a young instructor. Laughter filled the air, unpolished but honest. "This is one of the programs my foundation supports," Adrian explained quietly. "Free art classes for underfunded schools. My mother used to paint." Lena looked around the studio, her heart softening. "It is beautiful. You never mentioned this." He shrugged slightly. "People like to talk about my money, not what I do with it." She turned toward him. "You do not seem like the man they describe in the newspapers." "And you," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips, "do not seem like the woman who would marry a stranger for money?" Quote. The words stung, Though his tone was not cruel, she held his gaze. Maybe both of us are more complicated than we look. He studied her for a moment, then nodded as if conceding a quiet truth. Perhaps. When they left the studio, the afternoon light stretched golden across the skyline. For the first time, the silence between them was easy, almost peaceful. That evening, back at the penthouse, Adrian stood by the balcony while Lena arranged fresh lilies in a vase. The scent drifted through the air, delicate and calm. "You do not have to do that," he said. "We have staff for flowers." "I know," she replied, adjusting a stem. "But it helps me feel like myself." He watched her for a long time. "You miss your shop." "Every day," she admitted softly. "But at least the bills are paid now. My mother can keep the lights on." "That was the deal," Adrian said, but his voice lacked the certainty it once carried. She looked up, her eyes meeting his. "And what about you? What did you really get out of this deal?" His expression faltered for the first time. Peace, or at least the illusion of it. The answer lingered in the room, honest and heavy. Over the next week, the arrangement continued, events, dinners, photographs, but the edges of the contract began to blur. Adrian started walking her to the car instead of sending someone else. He asked her opinion on small things. Which tie looked less arrogant, which wine to serve. Little gestures, meaningless on paper, but they began to chip away at the walls between them. One night, after a late business reception, the elevator in their building stopped between floors during a thunderstorm. The lights flickered, and the hum of the city vanished beneath the roll of thunder. "Do not panic," Adrian said, pressing the emergency button. "The backup will activate soon." "I am not panicking," Lena said, gripping the metal rail. "Just trying to remember how to breathe." Quote, he chuckled under his breath. "Then breathe with me, slowly." The sound of his calm voice filled the narrow space, low and steady. She followed his rhythm, inhaling, exhaling. Their shoulders brushed in the dim light. "You are surprisingly good at this," she murmured. "At what?" "Making chaos feel safe." His eyes found hers in the flickering light. "Maybe it is because I am used to living in it." Quote, the elevator jolted back to life, and they both laughed a short, startled sound that felt almost like relief. When the doors opened, the world seemed quieter. They walked the rest of the hallway in silence until Adrian stopped near her door. "You handled that better than some of my executives would," he said. "Maybe because I did not have anything to lose," she replied. He looked at her for a long second. "That is where you are wrong." Lena did not ask what he meant. She simply nodded and stepped inside her room. But later, lying in bed, the echo of his voice followed her soft, certain, almost like another whisper. Somewhere deep inside, the contract was still ticking like a clock. Yet with every passing day, it felt less like a countdown to an ending, and more like the quiet beginning of something neither of them had planned. The first real test of their illusion arrived sooner than either of them expected. A week later, Adrian and Lena were invited to a high-profile business gala hosted at one of the city's most luxurious hotels. It was not just another dinner or photo opportunity. It was a battlefield dressed in silk and champagne, and every guest there had something to gain or to destroy. As they entered, the flash of cameras greeted them like lightning. Adrian's hand rested lightly on her back, guiding her through the crowd. Lena could feel her heart pounding, but she managed to smile, remembering his words from their first night. "Smile, Mrs. Cole. Tonight, the performance begins." The ballroom was a sea of glitter and ambition. Gold chandeliers reflected off mirrored walls, and the music hummed like the heartbeat of power. Adrian moved through the crowd with calm authority, every nod and handshake calculated. Lena followed, careful, graceful, trying not to let her nerves show. Halfway through the evening, a familiar name came up: Evelyn Hart, Adrian's former fiancée and now a major investor. The moment she approached, the air around them seemed to cool. Evelyn was tall, poised, beautiful in a sharp, polished way that made every word sound like a test. "Well, Adrian," she said with a thin smile, "I see you have moved on rather quickly. And this must be your wife?" Lena extended her hand politely. "Lena Cole, it is nice to meet you." Evelyn's handshake lingered longer than necessary. "I read about the wedding. It all happened so suddenly. Quite the surprise, even for those of us who thought we knew Adrian well." Adrian's jaw tightened, but his tone remained smooth. "Life has its surprises, Evelyn. Not everything requires your approval." Lena felt the tension rising. She could see curious eyes turning toward them, people eager for gossip. Evelyn's smirk widened. "Tell me, Lena, What is it like being married to a man who never lets anyone close enough to know who he really is? For a split second, Lena froze. Then, before Adrian could speak, she smiled calmly. It is like standing beside a locked door, she said softly. You do not open it by force. You wait until he decides to hand you the key. The words hung between them, disarming and quiet. Evelyn blinked, caught off guard, then laughed politely. How poetic. Go on. Adrian's gaze flickered toward Lena, surprised, impressed. The corner of his mouth curved slightly. That is why I married her, he said simply. The conversation ended there, but the moment traveled like electricity through the room. People whispered, cameras flashed, and before long, the narrative had shifted. Adrian Cole's mysterious wife was not just beautiful, she was clever. Later, as they left the ballroom, Adrian opened the car door for her. You handled that perfectly, he said. Lena gave a small smile. I figured you did not need another headline tonight. He studied her face for a moment, his expression unreadable. You did not just protect me, Lena. You protected yourself. She looked out the window as the city lights blurred past. I guess I am learning from you. Back at the penthouse, the tension of the evening lingered. Adrian poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. To survival, he said. She raised her glass. To locked doors, she replied. He chuckled, the sound low and warm. For a moment neither spoke. The distance between them was still there, but something invisible had shifted again, something fragile and real. As Lena watched the rain slide down the window, she realized she had stopped counting the days left on their contract. And from the way Adrian looked at her over the rim of his glass, it seemed he had stopped counting too. The following night was quieter than the ones before. The penthouse felt different now, less like a stage, more like a space they both actually lived in. After the gala, Lena had seen something new in Adrian's eyes, a crack in the wall he always kept between himself and the world. She found him on the balcony, his jacket off, shirt sleeves rolled, the city lights painting silver lines across his face. The wind carried the faint hum of traffic and the smell of distant rain. For a moment she simply watched him from the doorway, unsure if she should disturb him. You are not working, she said finally, stepping closer. He glanced over his shoulder, his tone softer than usual. Miracle, is it not? She smiled faintly. What are you thinking about? Adrian looked back at the skyline. How strange it is that peace always feels temporary. I used to believe that if I worked hard enough I could earn it. But the truth is, peace does not come from control. It comes from the moments you stop trying to own everything. Lena leaned against the railing beside him. And have you stopped trying? He gave a quiet laugh. Not yet. I do not know how. For a while, neither spoke. The air was cool, the city alive beneath them. Then Adrian turned toward her, his expression unreadable. Do you regret it? Regret what? This deal. This month. Lena hesitated. I thought I would, she admitted. But lately, it feels like the first time in years that my life has meaning, even if it is borrowed. He looked at her then, the distance between them shrinking. It does not feel borrowed to me, he said softly. The sound of his voice low, almost hesitant, made her chest tighten. She turned toward him, her hair brushing his arm. The world seemed to still. Adrian, she whispered, this is not part of the contract. Neither is the way you look at me, he replied. The words hung there, fragile and dangerous. His hand rose slowly, as if asking for permission, and when his fingers brushed her cheek, she did not pull away. The space between them vanished. The kiss was not planned, not perfect, but real gentle at first, then deeper, anchored in everything they had both been trying to deny. When they finally broke apart, the air felt heavier, the silence louder. Lena stepped back, her heart racing. We should not have done that. Quote, Adrian's eyes searched hers. You are right, but tell me you do not feel it. She could not. The words refused to come. Instead, she turned toward the glass doors, her reflection trembling under the city lights. When she spoke again, her voice was barely a whisper. 1 month, Adrian. That was the rule. He stood behind her, his voice quiet but sure. Maybe some rules were meant to be broken. Neither of them moved for a long time. Outside, the wind rose, carrying the sound of thunder from somewhere far away. Inside, 2 people stood in the golden half-light, both knowing that the line between their act and the truth had already begun to blur. The morning after the storm was supposed to be calm, but nothing felt calm anymore. The kiss had changed everything. Lena moved through the penthouse in silence, her thoughts tangled, her heart refusing to listen to reason. Adrian was already gone when she woke up, leaving only a note on the counter. Meeting at the board. Back by noon. She told herself it was for the best. Distance would help. But by midday, distance turned into disaster. Her phone buzzed with a flood of messages, links, headlines, photos. Someone had leaked the truth. A series of grainy images splashed across every social feed, her leaving Adrian's office weeks ago, a copy of the contract on a blurred screen, even a quote twisted out of context. A marriage of convenience, the headline read. Adrian Cole's fake wife exposed. Her stomach dropped. Cameras would be outside soon. She called Adrian, but the line went straight to voicemail. By the time he returned, the elevator doors opened to chaos, reporters shouting, flashes firing, microphones thrust forward. His jaw clenched as he forced a path through the crowd and guided her inside. "Do not say a word," he told her, voice tight with anger. Once they reached the penthouse, he slammed the door behind them. For the first time since she had met him, his composure cracked. "Who did you tell?" Her voice trembled. "No one. I swear, Adrian, I did not." "Someone did. Someone close." He paced across the room, fury and exhaustion fighting for control. "You should have been more careful. You should have—" "Should have what?" She cut in, her own fear turning sharp. "Should have hidden like a ghost? Pretended I do not exist beyond your signature?" His eyes hardened. "This was never supposed to become real, Lena. You knew that." The words struck like a blow. She swallowed hard, her throat burning. "I thought maybe it already had." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Rain started again outside, thin and cold. Adrian turned away, his voice low. "I have to fix this before it destroys the company. You should go somewhere safe until it calms down. Yekta." She stared at him, stunned. "You want me to leave? It is better for both of us." Her hands shook as she removed the ring, the simple gold band that had once been only a prop. "You said some rules were meant to be broken?" she whispered. "I guess that was another lie." He looked at her then, pain flickering behind his anger, but he did not stop her. Lena walked to the door, her footsteps echoing through the room. Before she stepped out, she turned once more. "For what it is worth, I never wanted your money, Adrian. I just wanted to believe that even a deal could turn into something real." And with that, she was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving Adrian standing alone in the silence, surrounded by everything he had built and the one thing he could not control slipping away into the rain. Days turned into a blur of silence and headlines. The scandal grew faster than either of them could contain it. Every network repeated the same story: Adrian Cole's marriage was a lie. Investors panicked, reporters camped outside the Cole Enterprises building, and the board demanded an explanation. Adrian barely slept. He spent every hour trying to repair the damage, but no press release could rewrite what had already spread. In every photograph, Lena's face appeared beside his, calm, kind, undeserving of the cruelty being thrown her way. And with every new headline, the guilt grew heavier in his chest. On the fourth morning, his assistant handed him a letter. "This came from her," she said quietly. It was short, just 5 words written in her soft handwriting. "I hope you find peace." That night, Adrian sat alone in his office, the city lights reflecting against the window like 1,000 silent witnesses. The contract lay on his desk, the inked signatures still crisp. He stared at it for a long time before finally tearing it in half. Enough pretending. The next day, the board meeting began in chaos. Cameras lined the hallway, and every reporter waited for him to speak. Adrian walked in without his usual armor of arrogance. His voice was steady, but his eyes were tired. "You all deserve the truth," he began. "Yes, the marriage started as an agreement. I needed a shield against a corporate threat, and she agreed for her own reasons. But somewhere in the middle of that lie, I forgot it was one. I fell for her, not for what she could do for me, but for who she is." The room erupted in murmurs, but he continued. "If you are looking for a scandal, there it is. A man who thought he could control everything and ended up losing what mattered most." When he walked out, the crowd followed, cameras flashing like lightning. Outside, he faced the reporters directly. "You want a quote?" he said, his voice echoing across the marble steps. "Here it is. Love does not need a contract. I intend to prove that." That evening, he went looking for her. It took hours to find the small flower shop on the corner of Maple Street. The lights were dim, the window display simple, a handful of lilies in a glass vase. Through the glass, he saw her arranging flowers, her movements careful, quiet, as if the world outside no longer existed. He stepped inside. The bell above the door chimed softly. She froze when she saw him, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Adrian," she whispered, "what are you doing here?" He walked closer. the words catching in his throat. "I came to return something that never should have been written." He pulled from his coat pocket the torn contract, now taped together just enough to be legible. "I told the world everything. No more lies, no more pretending." Her eyes filled with tears. "Why would you do that? You could lose everything." He shook his head. "I already did. I lost you." Lena's lips trembled. "Adrian, it is too late." Quote. He reached for her hand, voice low, almost trembling. "Then let me start over, not as a deal, as a choice." For a long moment, the only sound was the soft rustle of petals between them. Then she whispered, "1 month, that is what you asked for." He smiled gently. "Then let us see what forever looks like instead." Spring returned to the city like a quiet promise. The sharp wind that once rattled the windows of the penthouse now carried the scent of lilies and fresh rain. It had been 3 months since the scandal faded, 3 months since Adrian had walked into that flower shop and asked for forgiveness not as a millionaire but as a man. Lena had not given him an answer that night. She needed time, and Adrian had given her exactly that time, space, and silence. But he never stopped showing up. Some mornings, she found a cup of coffee waiting by her shop door. Other days, he sent flowers with no note at all, only a single line written on the wrapping. Still waiting to earn forever. Now, as the sun set behind the skyline, the flower shop glowed with soft golden light. The new sign above the window read "Bloom and Coal," painted by Lena herself. Inside, candles flickered between rows of fresh blooms. She was adjusting a vase when the door opened. Adrian stepped in, dressed simply this time, no suit, no entourage, just him. He carried a small wooden box in his hand. Lena turned, her eyes warm but cautious. "You are late," she said softly. He smiled faintly. "Traffic and nerves." She wiped her hands on her apron. "That is a first." Adrian took a deep breath and opened the box. Inside was not an expensive diamond, but the same simple gold ring she had once left on the table when she walked away. It had been polished, not replaced. He spoke quietly. "The first time I gave you this, it came with conditions, a time limit, rules. But I do not want a contract anymore, Lena. I want a promise. No signatures, no lies. Just 2 people who choose each other." Her throat tightened. "And what if I say no?" "Then I will still come here every day," he said, his voice trembling with honesty. "Not because I want to fix an image, but because I cannot imagine a life where you are not part of it." For a long moment neither moved. The street outside hummed with life, and the soft rain began to fall again, tapping against the window. Then Lena reached for the ring. Her fingers brushed his, and the warmth of his hand made everything else fade away. She smiled, tears shining in her eyes. "You never stopped whispering, did you?" He laughed quietly. "Only when I thought you were listening." Lena took the ring, slid it onto her finger, and looked up at him. "Then whisper it again, Adrian." Quote. He stepped closer, his voice low, steady, full of everything he had once been afraid to say. "Be my wife, not for a month, but for forever." Outside, the city lights shimmered through the rain. Inside, among the flowers and soft candlelight, Lena kissed him, their story no longer borrowed, no longer built on lies. It was not the end of a contract, it was the beginning of a promise. And as the camera of the world finally turned away, 2 people stood in the quiet glow of their own truth.